Hello everybody and welcome to Parks Bros. It's Drew here, and today I'm going to be giving you my full in-depth review and thoughts on Xcelerator. Now, Xcelerator, the ride at Knott's Berry Farm, opened up in 2002, being the first of its kind. That model, of course, if you're wondering, is called an Intamin Xcelerator, just spelled a little differently than its namesake. And the main signifying aspects of these rides is the fact that they have a hydraulic launch system. Xcelerator, of course, was the first of its kind to use this type of launch system and was the predecessor to rides like Top Thrill Dragster at Cedar Point, King Knott at Six Flags Great Adventure, and Formula Rossa at Ferrari World, which all of these coasters have had amazing world record breaking feats, such as tallest and fastest coasters in the world. So technically you can kind of thank Xcelerator for existing for that to even happen. But of course, I think I'm getting a little ahead of myself, because first of all, we've got to find this amazing piece of machinery. So once you enter into Knott's Berry Farm in Buena Park, California, there is definitely a ride that stands out in the skyline. It's huge, it's bright pink, and probably the most striking thing about it is that it looks like half the structure is floating. Now, Xcelerator has so many ways to get to it, so I won't describe them all, but I would say if you're trying to get straight to it from the front entrance, there are 3 separate main paths that you can take. One on the right-hand side going into Camp Snoopy, one going down the center underneath Silver Bullet's Cobra Roll, and one to the left heading into Ghost Town. Now, of course, if you want to go into Ghost Town and enjoy some of the attractions on the left-hand side of the park, be my guest. Some of the best rides in the park are over there. But if you're wanting to head to Xcelerator specifically, head down that center pathway or that right-hand pathway until you reach the final back right-hand corner of the park. And if you're really struggling seeing it, the next 2 tallest rides at the park are right next door in Sky Cabin as well as Supreme Scream. So if you can't see Xcelerator, you'll definitely at least be able to see one of those 2 attractions. Once you've found yourself outside of the entrance underneath that awesome looking neon sign, there will be 2 separate queues that you can take. The one on the left is your standard standby that most people will end up waiting in. On the right-hand side, though, is the fast lane option. So if for the day you've paid for that extra fast lane option to skip a lot of those lines throughout the park, take the right-hand queue and you can skip a good chunk of the line. Now, I will get back to that a little later on, but as of now, let's head through the standby. At first, you'll find yourself meandering underneath that giant 205-foot tall top hat element and right beside some of these massive support structures. Soon after passing by some hedges and even a spotting of the train or 2, you'll find yourself in a majority of the queue, which is just a giant section of switchbacks. Now, if that entire thing is full, expect to wait a good 2+ hours in the line. But on most days and most occasions, that is not the case. You'll just be going straight through the switchback section and not even have to worry about it. Now, one thing I do want to mention about the switchback area is the fact that there is shade, yes, but it is stylized shade in all triangular ways that makes the sun easily come through. And if you're stuck in one spot for quite a while, which will happen quite frequently with this ride in particular, you might be stuck in the sun for a good 10+ minutes straight. So of course, if you haven't put sunscreen on, if you're riding Xcelerator and there's a long line for it, I definitely would recommend it. And of course, I would recommend it if you're going to be at the park all day too. It is sunny Southern California after all, so sunscreen and glasses can always do a heck of a lot of good for you at any of these parks. A nice feature though inside that switchback section is the fact that there are actually vending machines for drinks, which is awesome. I do love the fact that there's that option if it's a very long wait and you're getting thirsty in that sun, that you can purchase a soda or a water. But after this switchback section, it'll all narrow down into a very thin queue, which will soon take a 90-degree right turn to meet back up with the fast lane line that we talked about earlier. Now this is where a real crossroads happens inside the queue, with there being two options to choose from with your seating position. On the left-hand side is the second car and on, whereas on the right-hand side is that first car or the first 2 rows of the roller coaster. Now, of course, since fast lane meets up at this point, you might be stopped there if you're in the standby line to let them go through. But this is where I would say be cautious on which part of the line you'd like to take. With the queue on the left-hand side, you will barely have to wait a couple rotations, maybe a little more, to get on many amazing seats on this ride. Now, if you take the right-handed queue to try and get in that front car, on most days, we're talking about another 25 to 30 minute wait extra, even if you have purchased Fastlane. So in my experience, a lot of days that I've been to the park, especially during slower days and months, Fastlane might be a great option for other attractions like Ghost Rider or Hang Time in the park, but if you specifically want to ride in the front row on Xcelerator, you still might find yourself waiting a half hour or more. So just do be wary of that. Now, of course, once you get up to that 50s styled station, you'll notice something very peculiar that I've not seen on any other ride that I've been on. And this is the gate system. For most roller coasters and rides, there will either be one gate to open up to all seats or one gate per row. Now, for Xcelerator, it's done a little differently where there's one gate per car. And each car features 2 separate rows. So that's another thing to be wary about. If you're waiting for the front row, it's technically for the first and second row of the ride. And I know many people want the absolute front instead of that second row. So they'll end up saying, no, go ahead of me, or they'll just wait for extra ride cycles to try and get that very front, which of course can slow that line down even more. Now, for the rest of the train in particular, it is actually quite confusing to many guests I've noticed over the years, just because they're so used to each gate being for one row only. So I can't tell you how many times on Xcelerator I have seen a half-empty train, even though it's a fully filled station, and it can, of course, make those wait times even longer. So I will say, after experiencing a second Xcelerator model that was built just a handful of years later in Top Thrill Dragster, everything works a little smoother with a gate at each individual row, especially for the first row. Now that we're taking our seats on this ridiculously fast-paced ride, you'll notice that the seat styling is a little different than probably any other coaster in Southern California. The seats are very tall, with headrests that even point inwards a little bit, and not too much legroom. So if you are taller, do keep that in mind. Besides that though, the seats are quite comfortable for what they are, and you'll have a seat belt to cover up your lap. And of course, in addition to this seat belt though, there is a classic Intamin T-bar restraint, which I would personally say is one of the most ergonomic and comfortable restraint types out there. This restraint can make you feel quite free, especially during a ride experience like Xcelerators, where you're going extremely fast for all of the ride. And all of the other coasters I've experienced with a T-bar restraint have always played that to their advantage. Now, one potential con to these T-bar restraints, however, is the fact that there is a big metal pipe that is going right in between your legs. So that might potentially give you some issues during the ride, especially during that brake run. So during that brake run, make sure to brace yourself. Now, of course, I'm getting ahead of myself yet again, but that's just because I can't wait to talk about this ride. So after you've buckled that seat belt, pulled down that lap bar, and gotten the proper checks, you'll notice this Christmas tree lighting display on the right-hand side at the front of the station, which I must say is at least a nice little chunk of theming, besides the gorgeously designed cars and some moderately designed murals. But soon that Christmas tree light will start to flash as the whole train moves back a good 6 inches. You'll hear a lock into place and of course feel the train suddenly stop before seeing the rest of the Christmas tree light up and you blast off with the fastest accelerating launch in all of the West Coast. This launch goes from 0 to 82 miles an hour in 2.3 seconds. There's only one coaster in the US that accelerates faster now, and that is in max force at Six Flags Great America. But my goodness, there is nothing out there like Xcelerator's launch. It just feels like you're getting hit by a semi-truck on a highway. It is just ridiculously forceful, and please make sure you have your head back, because otherwise you're gonna have a pretty nasty bump on the back of your head. But my goodness, I could talk about this launch for hours. It is just the most intense 2 seconds I can think of on pretty much any ride that I've ridden. That just quick jolt of acceleration from being completely stagnant to going faster than you should be going on the highway, quicker than you can sing the na 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 song, is just absolutely exhilarating. Now, a lot of people would argue where the best seat for this launch would be, and of course I'd probably say the front row, just because you can get that full force of the wind. But of course, you'd have to wait an extra 30 plus minutes on most days for that experience. But if you don't want to wait that long, I will say the launch is just as good in pretty much every single row. The only problem is you won't feel the full extent of that wind directly on your face. But man, you will still feel the might of that launch. Now, faster than you can make a pose, there will be a camera on the left-hand side to catch your initial reaction, which if you've never ridden the ride can be quite hilarious. But soon after, before you know it, you'll be heading straight up 90 degrees up that top hat element that's 205 feet tall at a full speed of 82 miles an hour. Going up this hill is actually pretty forceful positively, where it shoves you down into your seat a little bit, and it's what I could imagine a rocket feels like. Now, you'll be reaching the top very, very soon after going up, and this can be a very interesting element depending on where you sit. Near the front of the train, you'll get an intense pop of ejector airtime heading up towards the top of the top hat, whereas towards the middle and back, you might not feel anything going up. Now, as you crest the top on a clear day, you'll be able to see downtown LA, as well as even Catalina, and maybe even Disneyland if you could turn your neck that far. But over the top, you might get some nice floater, especially near the middle, and then you're plummeting down, straight down, back towards the ground. Now, of course, this is another part of the ride that totally depends on where you sit, on how much airtime you'll get. Now, of course, near the front, you might not get too much airtime, but over the back, you get insane ejector that whips you downwards as you're spiraling out. Soon after, you'll reach the valley underneath the biggest portion of the ride, and heck, even though it's only been about 10 seconds, it's already thrilling enough to want to go back in line and ride it again. But after this valley comes a massive overbank turn to the left that can easily make you gray out no matter where you sit. It might not feel so forceful, but for some reason, for me personally, my vision will definitely at least be going blurry on that overbank. And of course, if you're in the front row, you're going to be getting insane amounts of wind hitting you directly in the face during this whole portion of the ride. And if you've been on Millennium Force, just imagine those overbanks just after a launch in a top hat. Now, after that left overbank turn, you're going to be turning right, and this time it's going to be underneath that top hat structure, which I think is pretty cool, and can even add a nice little hand chopper if you've got your arms raised. And heck, there are even some days where I gray out a little bit on this turn too, before hitting the brakes sharply and getting vaulted forward. So definitely make sure to brace. But your 22-second ride on Xcelerator has just finished. Now, of course, after the brake run, you'll make a right turn into the station, exit off to the left, grab your things, which will be in bins, by the way, before heading down the exit ramp and checking out your hilarious photo of you potentially screaming some curse words because you weren't expecting the launch to be that way. But my goodness, Xcelerator at Knott's Berry Farm is just an incredible ride in my mind. And out of the almost 110 roller coasters I've been on, I can still say to this day it has my favorite launch of any of them. Just that brute force that you feel in half a second is incredible, and I have not been able to ride something that can replicate that or blow it out of the water, yet at least. Now, if it was just a launch in the top hat like some of the other Intamin accelerators out there, then I probably wouldn't have talked about it this long either. Now, of course, the launch is spectacular, the top hat is incredible, but a cool thing about this ride is the fact that it has 2 extra elements in those overbank turns. Sure, it's not the most insane thing to be doing a turn, but to be able to experience that speed and that quickness for another 10 seconds can make a huge difference in a lot of people's rider experience, whether they'd just like it to be over or love the fact that they're feeling that speed for a little longer. But I do think Xcelerator is a fantastic ride overall. It is easily one of my favorite coasters at Knott's Berry Farm and one of my favorite coasters, period. But with that, I guess we should get to our rating system, which is a little unorthodox if you did not know. I'll be giving a star rating for intensity and enjoyability, as well as a ski slope rating of what type of rider you should be before experiencing the ride, and of course, an overall rating out of 10. Now, starting off with that ski slope rating, I would definitely be a very experienced rider for Xcelerator. And I would probably say it is the most intense ride in the park. Even with rides like Ghost Rider, which is the biggest wooden coaster in all of California, and Hang Time, which has a 96-degree drop, Xcelerator just takes all of the intensity of those 2 rides and condenses it down to 22 seconds. And I would definitely say to prep yourself for Xcelerator, ride something like Pony Express, and then even Montezuma's Revenge before you check out Xcelerator. Now, moving on to the star ratings, I will definitely say this gets a 5-star intensity rating in my book, just for that launch, of course the ejector airtime on the top hat, and the intense overbank turns. But I will definitely say if the launch wasn't as quick and abrupt as it was, this star rating as well as my ski slope rating probably would have been a little lower. Now for the enjoyability star rating, I'm going to give this ride a rating of 4 stars. Now, it's not the most fun thing in the world, but there are definitely some ridiculously fun elements. And even though the ride mainly focuses on intensity, I've also ridden it so many times that it even can be a little relaxing for me at times. So make sure to take that into account. But you may be wondering, well, all these ratings are so ridiculously high, higher than some other rides that you've been on, that you've even rated a 9 or a 10. Now, yes, that is true, but most of those rides are longer than 22 seconds. And of course, offer a completely different experience. But of course, that leads to my final overall score for Xcelerator out of 10, and this definitely gets a 9 in my book. Does it have my favorite launch? Yes. Does it have one of my favorite airtime moments in the top hat? I'd say so. As well as just a cool look of the surrounding Southern California area. And does it have one of my favorite meandering moments in the overbank turns? Heck yeah. But of course, it's only 22 seconds long. So while it does offer a pretty smooth and amazingly fast experience, I find it really hard to rank it as a perfect 10. But I will say I love this ride to bits. And oh my gosh, it's given me some of my favorite memories at Knott's. But I will say, if you're an extreme thrill seeker and you're visiting the park for the first time, you have to check out this ride. But what do you guys think of Xcelerator? I'd love to know your thoughts down in the comments below. Do you agree with my opinion? Please let me know. And of course, remember, this is my own personal opinion on the ride, so don't take it as gospel or anything. Make sure to go ride it for yourself and make your own opinion. But thank you all so much for watching. And if you haven't yet, make sure to subscribe. We're going to have more reviews in the future on roller coasters, flat rides, and even dark rides. And don't be surprised with more ranking and tier videos as well. But again, thank you so much for watching, and until next time, we'll see you on the next ride.